Good morning. Happy Saturday, everybody. Are you ready for a story? Do you have your proper cups of tea? We can't read a story by Tolkien without a cup of tea. It's absolutely not a possibility. Um, I have one of my favorite teacups in the whole world. This teacup is from Japan, and it was a gift to me by my Japanese mom, Mama-san. And she has one just like this at her house, and she knows that my favorite color is yellow. So when I stayed at her house, she would give me this teacup every morning with the tea in it. And when I left, she gave me a present. And when I got home and opened it, it was a teacup just like hers. So now we have matching teacups. So I'm thinking about you, Mama-san and Hashimoto family. And I'm saying cheers. And I'm praying for Japan right now. Japan's got a lot going on. And I want you to stay safe. And I love you so much. Also, to complete the hug from Japan theme, I have my favorite teacup, and I look at this handle. How cool is that? It's just like everything about it is so cool. I got this sweater the last time I was in Japan. It was July and it was like 110 degrees, but I decided to buy a sweater, and it's like my favorite sweater, so I love it. Very good life choice. Think ahead, think ahead. And also, this is a prayer plant. It's super cool. It has like pink like veins. I really love this plant. I love it for many reasons. I've been able to keep it alive for almost 3 years. Yes, I'm becoming a good plant mom. But it's a gift from, again, my Japanese mom. She came and visited me. We went to this really cool nursery that I love in Half Moon Bay, and she bought me this plant. And prayer plants are super cool. They're called prayer plants because the leaves actually are open in the daylight hours, and then at night they fold up, kind of like hands that are praying. And if you don't believe me, get yourself a prayer plant and watch it happen at night. It's super cool. So my prayer plant and my cup of tea and my sweater, I'm thinking of Japan. I don't know if you guys happen to do that. Kind of a coincidence, kind of not. I don't know. I just was thinking about Japan this morning, thinking about my friends in Japan. And oh, good morning, Marianne. I'm so glad you're here. Yay. Okay, we're gonna read a story, y'all. This one is one of my favorites, and it just snuck up on me. My Aunt Heather, as an adult, I never read this story as a child, or I don't know, recently, like maybe 8 years ago or so. My Aunt Heather was like, "Oh, you gotta read Leaf by Niggle," and I was like, "What the heck is that? It sounds kind of made up. Like it doesn't sound like it's real." And she's like, "No, no, no, my boys love it. Like my cousins, they all love this story. It's like their favorite, and I read it to them when they get discouraged." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. Let me try this thing." So I don't know, I forgot about it, and then I read it really late one night all by myself, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Everyone needs this story. So I needed to read this story. I reread this often, and I needed to read it. So I just decided to invite you to join me. So I'm glad you're here, and we're going to get started. Does anyone have a favorite cup of tea? Anyone have like a favorite cup of tea? The tea that I'm drinking this morning out of my Japanese teacup is appropriately tea from Japan, and it's called royal milk tea. And British friends don't hate me, but I also fell in love with this when I was in Japan. It's an instant packet. I know, right? It's so good. It's like so good. It's like milk and sugar and tea. It's like hot chocolate but tea. It's amazing. It's so good. It's not tea like proper tea leaves tea, but it's just really comforting, and it reminds me of Japan because I drink this every morning in Japan. Okay, so I'm lonely for Japan, and I need a story. How's everyone else doing this morning? Um, Good. We left Niggle in this very odd situation. He went on a journey that he couldn't avoid, that he didn't want to go on, that he didn't prepare for, and he was in a hospital of sorts, and then he was working, and he overheard these voices talking about him. Kind of creepy, but like super cool. And then the voices are like, "You've been listening to us, haven't you?" And he's like, "Yep." And the voices are like, "What do you have to say for yourself?" Anyone like kind of chills at that point in the story? Like, I don't know, you're like reading along like do 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 Niggle, and then like he gets found, he's like seen, and it's kind of scary, but what's gonna happen next? Let's find out what happens to Niggle, shall we? I know Marianne is here. Good morning to everyone else. I don't really know why, but I can't see your names. So good morning to you. Hi, Danielle. Good morning, sunshines. It's so good to see you guys. If you have a favorite tea, type it in the chat box or the comments section. I just want to know. I want to know what you drink in the morning, people. What do you drink? Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Gracie, if you're watching. I love you so much, little person. Okay, we're gonna see what happens next. We left Niggle with these voices, and we can't let that we gotta go back to Niggle. Okay, so quick recap. There was a silence. The first voice spoke to Niggle quite close. You have been listening, it said. Yes, said Niggle. Well, what do you have to say? Could you tell me about Parrish? Said Niggle. I should like to see him again. I hope he's not very ill. Can you cure his leg? I used to give him a wretched time. And please don't worry about him and me. He was a very good neighbor, and he let me have excellent potatoes very cheap, which saved me a lot of time. Did he? Said the first voice. I'm glad to hear of it. There was another silence. Niggle heard the voice receding. Well, I agree, he heard the first voice say in the distance. Let him go on to the next stage, tomorrow if you like. Niggle woke up to find his blinds were drawn and his little cell was full of sunshine. He got up and found that some comfortable clothes had been put out for him, not a hospital uniform. After breakfast, the doctor treated his sore hands, putting some salve on them that healed them at once. He gave Niggle some good advice, a bottle of tonic, just in case he needed it, and in the middle of the morning, they gave Niggle a biscuit and a glass of wine, and then they gave him a ticket. You can go to the railway station now, said the doctor. The porter will look after you. Goodbye. Niggle slipped out of the main door and blinked a little. The sun was very bright. Also, he had expected to walk out into a large town to match the size of the station, but he did not. He was on top of a hill, green, bare, swept by a keen, invigorating wind. Nobody else was about. Away down under the hill, he could see the roof of the station shining. He walked downhill to the station briskly, but without hurry. The porter spotted him at once. This way, he said, and led Niggle to the bay, in which there was a very pleasant little local train standing. One coach and a small engine, both very bright, clean, and newly painted. It looked as if this was their first run. Even the track that lay in front of the engine looked new. The rails shone, the chairs were painted green, and the sleepers gave off a delicious smell of fresh tar in the warm sunshine. The coach was empty. Where does this train go, Porter? Asked Niggle. I don't think they've fixed its name yet, said Porter, but you'll find it all right. He shut the door, and the train moved off at once. Niggle lay back in his seat. The little engine puffed along in a deep cutting with high green banks roofed with blue sky. It did not seem very long before the engine gave a whistle. The brakes were on and the train stopped. There was no station and no signboard, only a flight of steps up the green embankment. At the top of the steps was a wicket gate in a trim hedge. By the gate stood his bicycle. At least it looked like his, and there was a yellow label tied to the bars with Niggle written on it in large black letters. Niggle pushed open the gate, jumped on the bicycle, and went bowling downhill in the spring sunshine. Before long, he found that the path on which he had started had disappeared, and the bicycle was rolling along over a marvelous turf. It was green and close, and yet he could see every blade distinctly. He seemed to remember having seen or dreamed of that sweep of grass somewhere or other. The curves of the land were familiar somehow. Yes, the ground was becoming level as it should, and now, of course, it was beginning to rise again. A great green shadow came between him and the sun. Niggle looked up and fell off his bicycle. Before him stood the tree. His tree, finished. If you could say that of a tree that it was alive, its leaves opening, its branches growing and bending in the wind that Niggle had so often felt or guessed, and had so often failed to catch. He gazed at the tree and slowly lifted his arms and opened them wide. "It's a gift," he said. He was referring to his art and also to the result, but he was using the word quite literally. He was looking at the tree. All the leaves he had ever labored at were there, as he had imagined them, rather than as he had made them. And there were others that had only budded in his mind, and many that might have budded if only he had had time. Nothing was written on them. They were just exquisite leaves, yet they were dated as clear as a calendar. Some of the most beautiful and the most characteristic, the most perfect examples of Niggle style were seen to have been produced in collaboration with Mr. Parrish. There was no other way of putting it. The birds were building in the tree. Astonishing birds, how they sang. They were mating, hatching, growing wings, and flying away, singing into the forest, even while he looked at them. For now he saw that the forest was there too, opening up on either side and marching away in the distance. The mountains were glimmering far away. Oh my gosh, can you guys believe it? He saw his tree. Oh, good morning in Chiang Mai. Oh, how are you doing? This is so much fun. I love having story time with you guys all over the world. Niggle has happened upon his tree. This is incredible. What would you do if you were Niggle? This is pretty crazy. Okay, now what's gonna happen next? Did anyone predict this? After a time, Niggle turned towards the forest. Not because he was tired of the tree, but he seemed to have got it all clear in his mind now and was aware of it and of its growth, even when he was not looking at it. As he walked away, he discovered an odd thing. The forest, of course, was a distant forest. Yes, he could approach it, even enter it, without its losing that particular charm. He had never before been able to walk into the distance without turning it into mere surroundings. It really added a considerable attention to walking in the country because as you walked, new distances opened out, so that now you had double, treble, and quadruple distances, doubly, trebly, and quadruply enchanting. You could go on and have a whole country in a garden or in a picture, as you preferred to call it. You could go on, but not perhaps forever. There were the mountains in the background. They did get nearer, very slowly. They did not seem to belong to the picture, or only as a link to something else, a glimpse through the trees of something different, a further stage, another picture. Niggle walked about, but he was not merely pottering. He was looking round carefully. The tree was finished, though not finished with just the other way about to what used to be, he thought. But in the forest there was a number of inconclusive regions that still needed work and thought. Nothing needed altering any longer. Nothing was wrong as far as it had gone, but it needed continuing up to a definite point. Niggle saw the point precisely in each case. He sat down under a very beautiful distant tree, a variation of the great tree, but quite individual, or it would be with a little more attention. And he considered where to begin work and where to end it and how much time was required. He couldn't really work out his scheme. Of course, he said, what I need is Parrish. There are a lot of things about earth, plants, and trees that he knows and I don't. This place cannot be left just as my private park. I need help and advice. I ought to have got it sooner. He got up and walked to the place where he had decided to begin work. He took off his coat. Then down in a little sheltered hollow hidden from a further view, he saw a man looking round, rather bewildered. He was leaning on a spade, but plainly did not know what to do. Niggle hailed him. "Parrish!" he called. Parrish shouldered his spade and came up to him. He still limped a little. They did not speak, just nodded as they used to do, passing in the lane. But now they walked about together, arm in arm. Without talking, Niggle and Parrish agreed exactly where to make the small house and garden, which seemed to be required. As they worked together, it became plain that Niggle was now the better of the two at ordering his time and getting things done. Oddly enough, it was Niggle who became most absorbed in building and gardening, while Parrish often wandered about looking at the trees, and especially at the tree. One day Niggle was busy planting a quickset hedge, and Parrish was lying on the grass nearby, looking attentively at a beautiful and shapely little yellow flower growing in the green turf. Niggle had put a lot of them among the roots of his tree long ago. Suddenly Parrish looked up. His face was glistening in the sun, and he was smiling. "This is grand," he said. "I oughtn't to be here, really. Thank you for putting in a word for me." "Nonsense," said Niggle. "I don't remember what I said, but anyway, it was not nearly enough." "Oh, yes, it was," said Parrish. "It got me out a lot sooner. That second voice, you know. He had sent me here. He said you asked to see me. I owe it to you." "No, you owe it to the second voice," said Niggle. "We both do." They went on living and working together, I don't know how long. It is no use denying that at first they occasionally disagreed, especially when they got tired. For at first they did sometimes get tired. They found that they had both been provided with tonics. Each bottle had the same label, a few drops to be taken in the water from the spring before resting. They found the spring in the heart of the forest. Only once long ago had Niggle imagined it, but he had never drawn it. Now he perceived that it was the source of the lake that glimmered, far away in the nourishment of all that grew in the country. The few drops made the water astringent, rather bitter, but invigorating, and it cleared the head. After drinking, they rested alone, and then they got up again, and things went on merrily. At such times, Niggle would think of wonderful new flowers and plants, and Parrish always knew exactly how to set them and where they would do best. Long before the tonics were finished, they had ceased to need them. Parrish lost his limp. As their work drew to an end, they allowed themselves more and more time for walking about, looking at the trees and the flowers and the lights and the shapes and the lay of the land. Sometimes they sang together, and Niggle found that he was now beginning to turn his eyes more and more often to the mountains. The time came when the house in the hollow, the garden, the grass, the forest, the lake, and all the country was nearly complete in its own proper fashion. The great tree was in full blossom. "We shall finish this evening," said Parrish one day. "After that, we shall go for a really long walk." They set out the next day, and they walked until they came right through the distance of the edge. It was not visible, of course. There was no line or fence or wall, but they knew that they had come to the margin of that country. They saw a man, and he looked like a shepherd, and he was walking towards them down the grass slopes that led up to the mountains. "Do you want a guide?" he said. "Do you want to go on?" For a moment a shadow fell between Niggle and Parrish, for Niggle knew that he did now want to go on, and in a sense ought to go on, but Parrish did not want to go on, and was not yet ready to go. "I must wait for my wife," said Parrish to Niggle. "She'd be lonely. I rather gathered that they would send her after me sometime or other when she was ready, and when I had got things ready for her. The house is finished now as well as we can make it, but I should like to show it to her. She'll be able to make it better. I expect more homely. I hope she'll like this country too." He turned to the shepherd. "Are you a guide?" he said. "Can you tell me the name of this country?" "Don't you know?" said the man. "It's Niggle's country. It's Niggle's picture, or most of it. A little of it is now Parrish's garden." "Niggle's picture," said Parrish in astonishment. "Did you think of this, Niggle? I never knew you were so clever. Why didn't you tell me?" "He tried to tell you long ago," said the man. but you would not look. He had only got canvas and paint in those days, and you wanted them to mend your roof. This is what you and your wife used to call Niggle's nonsense, or that daubing. But it didn't look like this then. Not real, said Parrish. No, it was only a glimpse then, said the man. But you might have caught the glimpse if you had ever thought it worthwhile to try. I did not give you much chance, said Niggle. I never tried to explain. I used to call you old earth grubber. But what does it matter? We have lived and worked together now. Things might be different, but they could not have been better. All the same, I'm afraid I shall have to be going on. We shall meet again, I expect. There must be many more things we can do together. Goodbye. He shook Parrish's hand warmly. A good, firm, honest hand, it seemed. He turned and looked back for a moment. The blossom on the great tree was shining like flame. All the birds were flying in the air and singing. Then he smiled and nodded to Parrish and went off with the shepherd. He was going to learn about sheep and the high pasture, and to look at the wider sky, and walk even further and further towards the mountains, always uphill. Beyond that, I cannot guess what became of him. Even little Niggle in his old home could glimpse the mountains far away, and they got into the borders of his picture. But what they are really like, and what lies beyond them, only those can say who have climbed them. I think he was a silly little man, said Councillor Tompkins. Worthless, in fact, no use to society at all. Oh, I don't know, said Atkins, who was nobody of importance, just a schoolmaster. I'm not so sure. It depends on what you mean by use. No practical or economic use, said Tompkins. I dare say he could have been made into a serviceable cog of some sort if you schoolmasters knew your business. But you don't, and so all we got was a useless people of his sort. If I ran this country, I should put him and his like into some job they're fit for, washing dishes in a communal kitchen or something. I should say he did it properly, or I would put him away. I should have put him away long ago. Put him away? You mean you'd have made him start on his journey before his time? Yes, if you must use that meaningless old expression. Push him through the tunnel into the great rubbish heap, that's what I mean. Then you don't think painting is worth anything, not worth preserving or improving or even making use of? Of course, painting has uses, said Tompkins, but you couldn't make use of his painting. There's plenty of scope for bold young men not afraid of new ideas and new methods. None of this old-fashioned stuff. Private daydreaming. How could he have designed a telling poster to save his life? Always fiddling with leaves and flowers. I asked him why. Once he said he thought they were pretty. Can you believe it? He said pretty. Why, digestive organs of plants, I said to him, and he had nothing to answer. Silly footler. Footler, sighed Atkins. Yes, poor little man. He never finished anything. Ah, well, his canvases have been put to better use since he went. But I am not sure, Tompkins. You remember that large one, the one that used to patch the damaged house next door to him after the gale and the floods? I found a corner of it, torn off, lying in a field. It was damaged but legible, a mountain peak and a spray of leaves. I can't get it out of my mind. Out of your what? Said Tompkins. What are you two talking about? Said Perkins, intervening in the cause of peace. Atkins had flushed rather red. The name's not worth repeating, said Tompkins. I don't know why we are talking of him at all. He doesn't live in the town. No, said Atkins, but you had your eye on his house all the same. That is why you used to go and call and sneer at him while drinking his tea. Well, you've got his house now, as well as the one in town, so you should not grudge his name. We were talking about Niggle, if you want to know, Perkins. Oh, poor little Niggle, said Perkins. Never knew he painted. That was probably the last time Niggle's name ever came up in conversation. However, Atkins preserved that odd corner. Most of it crumbled, but one beautiful leaf remained intact. Atkins had it framed. Later, he left it to the town museum. For a long while, leaf by Niggle hung there in a recess and was noticed by only a few eyes. But eventually that museum burnt down, and the leaf and Niggle were entirely forgotten in his old country. "It is proving very useful indeed," said the second voice, "as a holiday and a refreshment. It is splendid for convalescents, and not only for that. For many, it is the best introduction to the mountains. It works wonders in some cases. I am sending more and more here, and they seldom have to come back." "No, that is so," said the first voice. "I think we shall have to give that region a name. What do you propose?" The porter said that a long time ago," said the second voice. "Train for Niggle's Parish in the bay," he shouted for a while now. "Niggle's Parish. I sent a message to both of them to tell them." What did they say? They both laughed. The mountains rang with it. And that is Leaf by Niggle. I love that ending so much. What did you think of that delicious little story? I absolutely love this. If you feel like you are painting a tree that is beyond your scope and beyond your ability, and maybe if you paint one little leaf, it matters. Paint the best and the most beautiful leaf that you can. I love this story. Very curious to hear your thoughts, so tell me all about it. What did you think of this one? If you've never read it before, go read it. It is a really good one. Yeah, so fun. Oh, well, have a wonderful Saturday. So great having story time with you. Keep painting, little painters. Keep making beautiful things. Keep lifting your eyes higher than what you see in the shadows. Keep looking at the mountains. And let's see what we can do with this day, shall we? Go get 'em. I'm cheering you on.